The year is 2014. There's a slight chill in the air as the summer months began to breathe their first whispers of winter. It's been a good year for gaming, especially for horror fans, with earlier releases like The Forest and Among the Sleep whetting the appetites for gamers for later releases like The Evil Within, Alien Isolation, and the now tragically remembered PT. But none of these games would have the same staying power as one that, despite its ubiquity today, didn't receive a fraction of the marketing or widespread attention as its contemporaries. In fact, this game would not boast the same AAA developer teams either, instead being born from the labor of a single man. If you were like me, your first introduction to this game series wasn't through flashy advertisements or merchandise, but it would instead be through a new video from one of your favorite Let's Players, proclaiming it to be the scariest game in years.
Hello everybody, my name is Remarkably and welcome to Five Nights at Freddy's.
Don't worry, Adam, I won't put him in the thumbnail this time. Now, sure, Markiplier wasn't the first to play Five Nights at Freddy's on YouTube, but he certainly was one of the most important people to, boasting a subscriber count of about 4 million at the video's initial release. From there, it spread like wildfire. In just 4 days after its launch, this little indie horror game would start its journey to become one of the highest grossing and culturally recognizable intellectual properties in recent memory. A success story that a lot of indie horror games today hope to capture just a small fraction of. To FNaF's creator, this success was as unexpected as it was life-changing. Scott Cawthon, a man who by all means could have been called a failed game developer at this point, had finally managed to make a breakthrough in a market that had served him disappointment after disappointment. Despite the detractors and the financial calamities of the past, Scott had finally done it. His many sleepless nights and long workdays finally resulting in the greatest success of his life. Though, there was still a lingering question that hung over the euphoria of FNaF's success. A question that would manifest itself again and again to Scott over the next few years. Where does the story go from here? The year is 2015. There's a slight chill in the air as the warmer summer months began to breathe their first whispers of winter. It's been a good year for gaming, especially for indie game fans, with releases like N++ and Ori and the Blind Forest being the best examples I could find on Google. But one other indie game would soon stand taller than all the rest, both in popularity and in staying power. Undertale. Following a grueling 32-month development and a Kickstarter campaign that raised 10 times the amount of its original goal, Undertale was released into the world on September 15, 2015. The game was a seemingly overnight success, with its charming writing, humor, and unique pacifist options for gameplay taking the world by storm. Audiences were enraptured by this RPG epic where the main key to success was finding non-violent solutions to traditionally violent RPG problems. Let's Players would dedicate multi-part series to playing the game, journalistic aggregates would praise it to the highest degree, and the game's fan base would go on to create some of the most ambitious fan creations ever. In short, Undertale had more or less taken over the world, all thanks to the work of its creator, Toby Fox and Timmy Chang. Now, Toby was no stranger to internet notoriety, with his previous work on music for the webcomic Homestuck and an Earthbound Halloween hack we're not allowed to talk about, helping him build a solid reputation over the years. But that notoriety would seem like nothing in comparison to the unthinkable fame that this new game would thrust upon him. Toby, never one to seek this kind of widespread stardom, was at first uncomfortable by the sheer level of success his project had gained. But as time went on, the possibilities that this newfound success had created for him began to become more clear. Toby could use the popularity for more than just personal gain, but as an avenue to create the game he's always wanted to create the game of his dreams. As Undertale began to take on a life of its own, Toby would turn his attention to his next sole focus, making that dream a reality. Oh, hi there, Kmart shoppers. Spaceman Scott here, himbo and amusing side character in someone else's story. Now I know what you're thinking. Scott, why the hell are you using this nice voice acting microphone and not the lav mic like the last 2 live action videos you did? No reason. But, as you probably guessed from both that intro as well as the title of the video, today we're going to be talking about Five Nights at Freddy's and Undertale. Specifically, though, about their game developers, both with their rise to fame, their individual franchises, and how the two of them have approached their form of storytelling and what we can learn from that. I actually don't have any physical props for this episode, but I do have this framed photo of Matt Pat's cringy-ass Five Nights at Freddy's 3 theory video intro, which I think that suffices pretty well. Come to think of it, it's kind of interesting how Matt Pat's like inextricably linked to both Five Nights at Freddy's and Undertale, what with the Sans' Nest controversy and, yeah. So, without further ado, and in the words of the internet's favorite whipping boy,
it's time.
This video was brought to you in part by our lovely patrons over on Patreon. Ian Shepard, Meh012, Meeps, Wesley Norton, Orion E, Facey, and Nana Neobard. If you like this video and want to see more like it more often, then consider joining my Patreon and telling me to hurry up. It's the only place to see videos like this early, get some exclusive content, and get your very own I financially supported this white boy sticker. Look at that. Look how nice that looks. I should be paying you. I mean, you should— Fuck! Spaceman Scott on Patreon.com. Link in the description. Scott Cawthon was probably born sometime in the last 100 years, spending his early childhood presumably somewhere in the United States. Maybe Texas. I don't know, does anyone actually give a shit about this early life nonsense? No, where our story truly starts is in 1994, with the creation of Scott's first ever game, Doofus. After many years of being interested in coding and game development, and more than a few failed attempts at doing both, Doofus was the first truly finished game that Scott had ever created. Born from the often criticized game-making software Click and Play, now Click Team Fusion, Doofus is a fairly rudimentary game, especially compared to Scott's later works, consisting of you controlling a pink dinosaur that throws balls at other dinosaurs. While humble in its execution and scope, Doofus helped solidify Scott's passion for game creation, a passion that would soon come second only to his religion. Though in Scott's case, it wouldn't take long for him to find a way to fuse the two. After producing several games along the years, Scott joined the production company Hope Animation in the early 2010s, a company whose sole focus was creating educational and entertaining games and movies, all with a distinctly religious message. Don't even tell me this doesn't put the fear of God in you.
I am the glob glow gab galab, the schwabble double wabble gabble flibber blabber blab. I'm full of schwibble glibber kind. I am the yeast of thoughts and minds.
This career choice made sense given Scott's degree in computer animation as well as his Christian faith, as he went on to produce a number of games and movies while working for Hope Animations. Some standout examples include Noah's Ark, The Pilgrim's Progress, A Christmas Journey, and the Jesus Kids Club. Hey, you think any of the other kids in Scott's later games joined the Jesus Kids Club? Child murder's the punchline! However, these religious-themed games would not bring Scott the financial or personal success that he had hoped for, and worse yet, would begin to disenchant him with not only game creation, but his faith entirely.
Despite good reviews, my Christian projects were all financial failures. I came to a point where I was very disillusioned and frustrated with God. Actually, it was more like a broken heart. I felt like I'd squandered so many years of my life. Years that could have been spent going back to college, but were instead spent working on Christian projects that went nowhere. I came to the conclusion that I could not have failed so miserably unless God himself had been holding me down. Either God didn't exist, or God hated me. I didn't know which was worse.
As time went on, Scott began to stray away from his more Christian-centered games, instead choosing to dip his feet into darker themes, first seen with his release of The Desolate Room in 2007. Though, like so many games beforehand, neither The Desolate Room nor its sequel, The Desolate Hope, would be the commercial successes that Scott had hoped for. More games would come, most made quickly and with the hope of turning over a small profit, though Scott's lack of success would only compound as time went on. It seemed as if, despite his genuine passion and love for game creation, he just couldn't translate that into financial success. The games he created were either written off completely or heavily panned by the few reviewers that even bothered to play them, with Scott's 2013 release Chipper & Sons Lumber Company being a prime example of the undue hate that seemed to come back again and again.
Look at it! Look at all of it! Ghastly faces twisted in a grimacing mockery of joy.
Scott had hit rock bottom. taking up jobs in web design, truck driving, and working as a cashier for Dollar General just to make ends meet. When his life insurance policy was canceled due to frequent thoughts of ending his own life, he was left with truly nothing. And, like so many times before, he found himself at the mercy of the same God he felt had turned his back on him.
I went before God again, and it was the first time that I truly went before him with nothing. I had nothing to offer him. I told him to use me somehow, although at that moment I had no idea what he could possibly use me for.
At his lowest point, his career, faith, and life all very much on the line, Scott would soon learn what God had in store for him. For in the tapestry of failure that had been woven these past several years laid the roadmap for success. A success that Scott had waited for so very, very long. For 6 long months, Scott toiled away on his newest and most likely last game, Five Nights at Freddy's. Partly inspired by the criticisms levied at Chipper & Sons Lumber Company, specifically about how his character designs and animations often looked like creepy animatronics, Scott chose to play into this apparent strength, with the titular antagonist of this new horror game being animatronic characters. Certain design elements were similarly inspired by Scott's previous financial failures, with the new game's animatronic exoskeletons looking as if they'd been taken directly from the Desolate Room or Desolate Hope before them. In a way, Five Nights at Freddy's was equal parts a culmination of the missteps of Scott's past, as well as entirely uncharted territory. While some earlier games had mild themes of horror, this new creation would prove to be his first genuine foray into the genre. Gone were the days of high-concept sci-fi epics or easily consumable minigames, being replaced instead by a simple, formulaic horror game that concealed a much darker and grisly story than the usual Scott Cawthon fare. While many felt that Scott's switch from Christian entertainment to horror was unexpected, those who were familiar with his previous work were much less surprised. You can see the building blocks and blueprints of Five Nights at Freddy's in a lot of Scott's earlier works. Hell, even the Jesus Kids Club has a few jump scares in it.
What Zombie Cat does is more like...
But all that would have been pointless if this game, like all his others, also failed. After 6 months of tweaking, designing, and game testing, Scott had finally finished what would become the most important game of his life. Releasing Five Nights at Freddy's on a number of indie game hosting websites and later Steam, early reviews and reactions were positive, much to Scott's minor relief. But this initial support would be paltry in comparison to what came next. When the downloads for the game began to skyrocket and the Let's Plays became too numerous for Scott to keep up with, the result was clear. Five Nights at Freddy's would be the success that Scott had long prayed for. In that moment, perhaps Scott was given an answer to the question that had caused him so much consternation. What could God possibly use him for? Wait, does that imply that FNaF was an act of divine intervention? Oh, fuck. Toby Fox was born. He is now alive. This is all the early life bullshit you're getting. Growing up in the early 90s, Toby Fox was very much a product of the decade, spending hours upon hours in front of his family's SNES and immersing himself in the many wild and wonderful worlds that his favorite RPGs offered. Though of all the games he played at a young age, none would go on to inspire Toby in quite the same way as Earthbound or Mother 2.
Earthbound dominated my childhood. It gave me a sense of humor. It helped me learn how to read. Its lessons served as a basis for my sense of justice and courage.
This bizarre yet charming role-playing game would go on to inspire Toby not just personally, but professionally as well. As with the turn of the century, Toby would begin to experiment with game creation. His software of choice would be no other than RPG Maker, the same game-creating software used to create games like Eve, Ao Oni, and a few other ones. Beginning his game creation journey in the early 2000s, Toby would gradually familiarize himself with the many intricacies and stupid shit that the software offered. Couple this up with the sudden ubiquity of the internet, and it wouldn't be too long until the world saw firsthand the kind of talent that Toby possessed. Eager to connect with other aspiring game creators, as well as like-minded fans of Earthbound, Toby found himself joining various Mother 2 related message boards under the pseudonym Radiation. From here, he would produce a number of amateurish hacks for Earthbound, with his most popular one being Radiation's Halloween hack. Now, as a professional courtesy, I'm not going to spend a long time on Toby's Halloween hack, because he's made it pretty clear that it's not his proudest work. Disavowing the hack on many occasions is nothing more than just a bad ROM hack with swears, which, for anyone who's played it, is...
I have f***ing had it with your You fuckers are gonna have your bodies ripped in half. I'll shove your asses so far down your throats that when you crap, you'll sing fucking Beethoven. TLDR, eat.
Accurate. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to delve too much into the Earthbound Halloween hack, primarily because Toby Fox is not proud of it, and a lot of people were rightly upset with the fact that he used a homosexual pejorative in it, but as a bi dude, as well as someone who has a terrible fucking sense of humor, there's something cosmically hilarious about the term TLDR, eat shit, followed by the first ever appearance of Megalovania ever. Like, the same Megalovania that now appears in Super Smash Bros. Like, fuck you, that is the most hilarious shit.
Speaking of Megalovania, it became clear very quickly to all those paying attention that Toby was a phenomenal composer, having created a good majority of the music used in said Halloween hack. This talent for music creation was not lost on one Andrew Hussey, creator of the wildly popular webcomic/religion, Homestuck. Toby would work closely with Andrew in the coming years on original music for the comic, eventually becoming the lead composer for the entire project. It seemed as if things were only getting better for Toby, having made numerous professional connections and lifelong friends through his work on both Homestuck and his past ROM hacks. However, he would soon find himself undertaking a much greater calling, creating the game of his dreams. On a rainy night in 2011, incredibly sick and without access to medicine, Toby would lay down for another night's rest, sure to be plagued with fever dreams and discomfort. Yet the dream that followed would not be one of incomprehensible horrors or of maddening impossibilities, but instead would be that of an ending. An ending to a game that Toby had never seen before. An ending to a game that he knew he had to create.
While I was sleeping, I had a vivid dream about the ending to a game. Since then, I felt like I had to make the game with that ending. I don't even know if it's particularly good, but I have to do it.
It seemed like an impossible task to create a game based around an ending that had only come to him in a dream. But Toby was not one to shy away from the impossible, especially when it affected him so personally. In the years to come, Toby would begin work on this game, creating characters, music, and the overarching story that would lead to that ending he saw in his dream. This game was not Undertale. You see, despite his lofty goals and motivation, Toby remained unsure on whether he could actually create a game to this scale, unsure on whether he could actually make this dream a reality. And so as a result, he created Undertale. In a way, Undertale was not only a way for Toby to get the necessary funds and clout needed to create his dream game, but it was to test himself, to see whether creating a full game alone was even possible.
When I made the demo of Undertale, I made it to prove to myself that it was possible to make a whole game alone, with some help with the art. Because I was able to make it in a few months, I felt that I had proved that it was possible.
It took over 30 months for Toby to create Undertale, toiling for hours on characters, music, dialogue, level designs, and a whole mess of other creative endeavors. But impassioned by the support of Andrew Hussey, Temmie Chang, and a myriad other past friends and contacts, as well as a Kickstarter that well outperformed its initial goal, Toby carried on, slowly but surely creating what would soon be considered the best indie game to come out in years. When Toby finally released Undertale in September 2015, it was a near immediate success. While its connections with the Homestuck fan community and the outperforming Kickstarter were early indications of Undertale's potential fame, Toby was still taken aback at how quickly the game seemed to explode in popularity. Famous YouTubers would create multi-part series dedicated to playing Undertale's many different routes. Theory videos would abound, speculating on the lore of the game and its many unanswered questions. Fan animations that both re-envisioned scenes from the game as well as expanded upon its lore began to appear more and more. Merchandise, both official and otherwise, began to inundate the reaches of stores like Etsy and Redbubble. Gaming aggregates would name Undertale the best indie game of 2015, with many others claiming it not to be only that, but the greatest game ever created. Undertale's pop cultural influence would invade the real world as well, as references to skeletons giving bad times would make overly religious parents clutch their pearls in new and exciting ways.
How do I help my daughter not be attracted to such demonic things?
The game even started a larger debate on if more games should have the option of pacifist runs, and how Undertale may be an early indicator on the way gaming will go in the future. Fuck me, Undertale became so influential that we can now say with no hyperbole that the fucking Pope has a copy. And evidently he's played it too. But despite the near blinding effect this newfound fame and fortune brought, Toby's eyes were instead transfixed on his next project, making his dream a reality. Undertale not only proved to him that he could do that, but it provided him the opportunities and resources necessary to do so. And so, Robert Toby Fox marched confidently towards his next and loftiest project yet, to create the game of his dreams. To create
So when you were making Five Nights at Freddy's 1, were you already planning on making a sequel or any other ideas what were flinging in your head on what to do?
I definitely left a lot of things open-ended, you know, in case I wanted to expand upon them later. I mean, obviously, like I did not have the entire story planned out, as I know there's much debate about that on the subreddit. Like, oh, you know, he's some kind of mad genius that had, you know, 7 games planned out from the beginning. No, I didn't.
So, your child murder animatronic video game has gone viral, bringing you the untold success and fortune that has eluded you for so very, very long. Where the fuck do you go now? Do you stick to your original plan of letting Five Nights at Freddy's be your last game, retiring your career on a high note? Or do you stay the course and see just how far this series can go? For Scott Cawthon, the answer was simple. It was the second. Scott got to work on the second Five Nights at Freddy's seemingly immediately after the success of the first one became apparent, with a trailer for Five Nights 2 going live just 2 months after the release of the first game, much to the hype of horror fans near and far. To say that the excitement this trailer created was insane would be actually a really good descriptor, showcasing brand new animatronics, expanded gameplay mechanics, and my parents' response to me just wanting some goddamn privacy. No doors.
Speaking of privacy, let's talk about today's sponsor, ExpressVPN.
In today's ever-changing world, online privacy is quickly becoming something of an oxymoron, with more and more bad actors hoping to steal your precious internet viewing data and sell it to the highest bidder. But luckily for you, there exists a solution: ExpressVPN. If you're like me and you've made a career out of pissing off people with extensive knowledge on hacking and dark web chicanery, a VPN is just one of the many tools you can use to protect yourself and your data, and ExpressVPN is easily one of the best. Not only does ExpressVPN mask your IP address, making it all the more difficult for you to be tracked and targeted by malicious entities, but it also allows you to access an entirely new catalog of content. As with the option of setting your VPN to anywhere in the world, you can watch region-blocked content that other people can't, like Irish Netflix, or if you live in Utah, other sites.
As someone who's used ExpressVPN in the past, I can attest to both its effectiveness and ease of use. But hey, don't just take my word for it. If you want to try it out for yourself, you can use the link in my description below to get yourself 3 free months when signing up for membership. But now, back to the video.
It was clear that FNaF 2 would be quite the sequel, but a game that promises to be twice as ambitious as the first one takes time, and so it was the general expectation of the fanbase that FNaF 2 wouldn't see a full release until the very end of the year or early into the next, and there it fucking is less than a month later. Surprising literally everybody, Five Nights 2 was released a little under 3 months after the first one. In less than 3 months, Scott had created a bona fide sequel to his horror masterpiece, once more dominating the Let's Play circuit and seeming to satisfy just about everybody who liked the gameplay of the first game. However, those who were drawn to FNaF more for its lore and backstory would be given a much different experience. You see, Five Nights at Freddy's 1 was a fairly sparse game when it came to direct storytelling. Aside from phone guys stuttering on the phone and then getting bored, you didn't really have a lot to go off of. To piece together the game's overarching narrative, you'd have to use context clues hidden around the map, like children's drawings or newspaper clippings to ascertain anything beyond, wow, this sexy fox robot's actually gonna fucking kill me, isn't he?
I should take your fucking...
But despite this circuitous form of storytelling, much of the fanbase was enthralled by the vague yet compelling story that FNaF 1 created, discussing on forum boards and theory videos about the 5 missing children and their animatronic counterparts, what the constant use of the phrase "it's me" meant to the overall story, and what was the significance of this unexplained yellow bear. In short, while FNaF 1 was restrained in how much story it gave to its players, this restraint seemed to only captivate fans even more. With FNaF 2, Scott had the opportunity to build on the existing plot even more, expanding the timeline and once again hinting at a myriad of different secrets for fans to dig into. And dig in they did. Now with 2 installments in the series, the fan base was quick to pull the game apart, sifting through unused game files, hidden cutscenes, secret characters, and everything in between. And while many answers were given, it seemed as if there were even more questions for fans to theorize and speculate on than those given genuine resolutions. Questions like, are the toy animatronics haunted, or are they just experiencing malfunctions? Does the bite of 87 happen during one of the nights featured in the game? Who is this purple guy, and how many children did he kill? And, okay, but for real, what the fuck is up with the yellow bear? However, not all of these mysteries were created equal. Debates about whether FNaF 2 was a sequel or a prequel raged through the fanbase for months after its release, with some claiming that because FNaF 2 featured the same titular characters as the past game and an even worse state of disrepair, it was clearly a sequel. Other fans pointed out that the game was directly set in 1987, a year that was very clearly referred to in the past tense in the game prior.
They used to be allowed to walk around during the day, too, but then there was the bite of 87. Yeah.
Also, the phone guy's still alive, so that was kind of an indicator too. But these fan debates didn't just stop with the game's placement on the timeline, but instead spread to the characters therein as well. While many new characters could be explained with some level of accuracy, others didn't seem to have a place in the story whatsoever. Faces like Shadow Bonnie, Shadow Freddy, and JJ were relegated to nothing more than really just surprise cameos, their significance to the story remaining a mystery that not even the most diehard of fans could explain. Simply put though, while FNaF 2 delivered on what many fans were hoping for in a sequel, it would leave many theorists and lore analysts wanting. The issues with FNaF's restrained storytelling were starting to become more apparent. What had been the first game's main strength would be executed less successfully in FNaF 2, as the timeline of the game and its overall lore started to become more and more tricky to understand. And so, it was the hope of many fans that these issues with the story would be remedied in the next installment in the series, Five Nights at Freddy's 3. But they'd have to wait at least a year before that came out. I'm just fucking with you, it came out 4 months later. FNaF 3 was not only the 3rd installment in the series, but was what many people believed to be the final one. Placed nearly 30 years after the grisly events of the first 2 games, you play as a night shift guard for the soon-to-open Fazbear's Fright, a horror attraction hoping to cash in on the deaths of multiple children several years ago, which, given the fact that this game is set in 2023, Yeah, I could see that happening. The game is novel for the fact that it pits you against not 5 or 10 animatronics, but instead, just one. The game and the series' primary antagonist, Springtrap. Remember him, he's gonna come back later.
I always come.
After completing each night, you're met with a new minigame, each of which depicts a flashback to an unknown time in the past. Playing as Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, you follow Shadow Freddy through an abandoned pizzeria, each time inevitably being attacked and disassembled by the purple guy. This minigame repeats 4 times until the last night, in which you and the rest of the Jesus Kids Club confront the purple guy. He then jumps into his trusty animatronic suit, Juju's on that beat, and is left for dead for 30 years. Surprise! Springtrap has actually been the haunted corpse of the purple guy this entire time. Bing bang boom, bad end. Wait, what? That's right, FNaF 3 has multiple endings. 2 to be exact. Playing through the game normally, surviving each night and just not giving a fuck will get you the aforementioned bad end, showing you a screen of each animatronic head, each with a single glowing light, signifying that the spirits of the children still inhabit the mechanical monstrosities. In order to get the good ending of FNaF 3, you'll need to, what the fuck? Hey, look, we did it! The children's spirits are finally put to rest. Now, FNaF 3 isn't a perfect game, both in regards to its mechanics and the story in general, but it still makes an earnest attempt to bring some finality to the series. Sure, its many games in the way of storytelling are contrived and incredibly hard to follow, but at this point, fans have become very used to this cryptic form of lore delivery. 2 previous games have conditioned them to be more receptive to only finding out integral parts of the lore by plugging in secret codes into tiles on the wall or memorizing how many times Foxy laughs before shoving his hook up your ass. While FNaF 3 still left a lot unanswered, the game delivered on a lot of extra lore that fans had been hoping for, filling in blanks along the way and, again, giving fans something that many never thought they'd see from this series: an actual sense of closure.
I don't even think that I want there to be any more Five Nights at Freddy's after this.
By all accounts, it seemed as if Scott was done. He had made one of the most influential horror IPs of the 21st century, created a story that, while still filled with unanswered mysteries, seemed to have as neat of a bow as one could hope for. The lore still made a good amount of sense, even if those engaging with it had to make the occasional jump to fully understand everything. For better or for worse, Five Nights at Freddy's was done. Until it wasn't. Unsatisfied with the fan reaction to the game's difficulty and jump scares, Scott decided to create yet another game in the series, Five Nights at Freddy's 4. His hope was that this game would be able to satisfy fans who weren't happy with the scares in FNaF 3.
People were not happy with the jump scare, and it's kind of as simple as that. People weren't happy with the jump scare of Springtrap, and that really bothered me. I wanted to make another entry that was really, really scary again.
And while Scott was able to make an objectively scarier game, something else paid the price. And unfortunately for all those following the lore, it would be the game's story. After teasing a new game for a few months and inevitably releasing it well before its original release date, Five Nights at Freddy's 4 promised to be the final chapter in the FNaF story. The story of Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is a fucking mess, taking whatever amount of finality from the final game and shoving it straight into a yellow bear's mouth.
Was that the—
No, that would make sense. You see, this little scene right here actually perfectly encapsulates FNaF 4's biggest failing: adding unnecessary lore and further confusing the story already known by fans. Why is this the bite of 83 and not 87? Why is there a bite of 83? Why has no one talked about the bite of 83 before? Why did there need to be a bite of 83? Who is the crying child and who is psychic friend Fredbear? What does he mean by "I will put you back together"? And for fuck's sake, why the hell is there a literal mystery box? What kind of J.J. Abrams shit are you on, Scott? Simply put, FNaF 4 managed to be the complete opposite of FNaF 3, delivering on the scares but absolutely shitting the bed when it came to the story. So what did Scott do? Did he make a post clearing up the inconsistencies and attempting to offer the fan base a more succinct explanation for all the things? What are you doing, Sister Location? Five Nights at Freddy's 5, or Sister Location, was Scott's answer to fan disappointment over FNaF 4, the game that was also Scott's answer to fan disappointment over FNaF 3. Oh, we are so fucked. With this new installment, Scott hoped to give fans the much-needed clarification on what came before. He did not do that. Turns out Purple Guy is named William Afton. He's British and makes robots. This is Circus Baby. She's killed people. Maybe even Afton's daughter. Maybe she is Afton's daughter. I don't care. You play as a guy named Michael who's probably Afton's son. Neat. You're tasked with fucking around with some predator-looking animatronics. All of them are hot, especially Bonnie. The game also features comedy.
Welcome, Eggs Benedict.
Yep, still not funny. And for the ending, you either get scooped or get a nasty visit from the Clown Man.
Don't worry, bro, this isn't canon.
This game also has a custom night, but don't worry, the lore is absolutely important. Hey look, it's Purple Guy. Not that Purple Guy though. Wait a minute, is that a secret room? Is that the FNaF 4 house? Man, this sure does clear up fucking nothing! After Sister Location, Scott would create the actual last game in the series. For real. No bullshit. Scott's honor. Aptly named Five Nights at Freddy's Pizzeria Simulator, FNaF 6 is as close to an ending as the series could have, seeing the return of numerous past animatronic villains like Circus Baby, who looks different, Ennard, who looks different, the Puppet, who is now a furry, okay, and of course, Springtrap. Who the fuck is that? Anyhow, you know the drill by now. Check the cameras, get jump scared, find out a little lore here and there. Can't wait to see how this game decides to end its—
And to you monsters trapped in the corridors, be still. And give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. For most of you, I believe there is peace, and perhaps more, waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, old friend.
Jesus Christ, that's raw. I haven't heard that kind of hardcore religious line since, well, Scott Cawthon. But after 6 games, it seemed as if Five Nights at Freddy's had finally come to a true end. Its main antagonist and most important characters having finally been put to rest after all these years. And then he made 4 more games. And a DLC. And a movie. But for the sake of the video's runtime, and because this actual video is about storytelling for these developers, and I'm really losing the fucking plot right now, we're just going to focus on the first 6 games. And so, with 6 entries into the series, more than 7 animatronic bear derivatives, and a story that not even Columbo himself could unfuck, it was time for Scott to look back on what he had created. In the course of 3 years, Scott managed to create one of the most impactful horror IPs ever, one that was sure to stay long after he eventually retired from the game's creation. But I wonder if Scott ever spared a moment to think about why this series would continue to stick around. Did he attribute it to its gameplay, its themes, and replayability? Or did even he know that the main thing keeping FNaF alive was its near incomprehensible story? A story that those still devoted to the games would continue to try and make sense of forever. Sure, there'll be opportunities to expand on in the future, but as things stood in that moment, I wonder if Scott looked upon his creation and was happy. If he was proud of the story that he had created.
What's the progress on the rest of the game so far?
0%. Nothing. I've done nothing. I mean, I've done some songs and written the whole story, but...
People on the site have talked about Undertale to death, praising it for its humor, story, characters, gameplay, and just about everything else a white boy with a blue yeti and too much free time can think to talk about. And sorry to say, but I'm not going to be any different. It's okay though, I don't use a blue yeti, I use a CAD. But all flowery language and hyperbole aside, Undertale is a really fucking good game, with one of its most standout features conveniently being its story. After a short intro sequence introduces the lore of the game, you find yourself promptly falling to your death. Welcome to the underground! Upon waking up, you're met by a smiling yellow flower named Flowey, a dubious little fucker who's quick to tell you the law of the land: kill or be killed. A mantra that will inform the entire rest of the game, as every encounter presents you with the choice of either pacifism or destruction. I believe it was the contemporary scholar L. Hugini who once wrote, "Should I be a pacifist, or should I use my fists?" A truly gripping contemplation on the ethics of good and evil from his seminal work, Undertale the Musical, Lady Gaga Bad Romance animation song parody. From there, you begin to traverse the strange and enchanting world of the underground, meeting scores of memorable characters, secrets, environments, all in your attempt to make it back to the surface. While primarily a linear experience, Undertale's narrative still invites and rewards exploration, often hiding some of its most fascinating secrets only for those players willing to do some backtracking and journey off the beaten path. These can either be hidden items, little bits of lore, nonsensical shit, or though for those not interested in seeing those more tucked away secrets of Undertale, even Undertale's most linear playthrough still has plenty to offer. You'll find yourself befriending, fighting, and dating skeletons one moment, and then being chased by the bloodthirsty captain of the guard the next. Your journey will take you through the countless damp corridors of Waterfall to the lava-rich terrains of Hotland. Before you know it, you're partaking in a high-stakes game show against a flamboyant robot named Mettaton, twice, before making your way to the King's Quarters, all of it flowing seamlessly from one part to the next. But all journeys have a destination, and yours has been clear from almost the very start of the game. During your journey, you'll notice characters often speak in hushed tones about the king of their land, a seemingly murderous tyrant by the name of Asgore. Your meeting with him almost seems predestined, as despite all the good times and humorous moments you've experienced, a sudden reference to him reminds you that the inevitable showdown with him looms just ahead. Killing Asgore may not be your goal, but the more and more you hear about him, the clearer it becomes that there's no returning to the surface without doing so. The more you learn about Asgore, the more you get the impression that he might be beyond mercy. And when you finally do meet him, despite his polite, almost paternal-like way of speaking, he proves to you that that assumption was not misplaced. The fight with Asgore is one of the best showcases of Undertale's mastery in storytelling through gameplay, as depending on how you chose to play through Undertale, your main form of conflict resolution is quite literally destroyed in front of your eyes. You have to fight Asgore, and I don't mean dodge his attacks, attempt to appeal to his emotions and then spare him. I mean you have to fight Asgore. And if you've been attempting a pacifist route and have stayed at level 1 the whole game, it's grueling. Your fight with Asgore is truly nothing less than a war of attrition, a battle of wills against two individuals that, when you really think about it, don't even want to be fighting each other. Yet that doesn't matter now. Mercy's quite literally been taken off the table, and so you fight on. Once you've defeated Asgore and dealt what was almost the final blow, the reluctant king takes a knee and talks to you. Asgore tells you about the events that brought him here. The death of his son, the war with the humans, the underground's complete lack of hope, and how his actions lost him everything.
I miss my wife tales.
While yes, he had given his people hope once more, Asgore committed countless atrocities, betrayed his own morals and conscience, and now he only wants for this foolish war to be over. With closed eyes and an acceptance of his own fate, Asgore tells you to take his soul, to use it to escape the underground. Only then are you given the option to spare him. And if you do, he's elated. Elated that despite all the horrors he's committed on you and your kind, despite his near irredeemable past, that you still chose to stay in the underground. He tells you about the possible future that he, his wife, and you could have together, sitting in the living room, telling stories, eating pie, and being like a family. And before he can say another word,
Yo, Asgore just got Thanos, what the freak?
greeted by the first face you ever saw in this world, Flowey then takes the human souls and, true to Asgore's words, becomes godlike. Sparing Asgore results in the true final boss of the game, Photoshop Flowey, a frenetic clusterfuck of a fight that must have pushed RPG Maker to its absolute limits. But defeat him, and you once again are given the options to fight or spare. The same options given to you after defeating Asgore. The same options that Flowey made pointless. Kill Flowey, and he'll congratulate you on being just like he assumed. But spare him, and you'll do more than just defeat Flowey. You'll prove him wrong. Each time you spare Flowey, he becomes more enraged, more frustrated, and more confused. You have to spare him 13 times before it actually works, and he runs away. You see, you didn't just defeat Flowey, you defeated his entire belief system. Kill or be killed was never the way this world worked, despite his persistence to the contrary. And in your act of mercy, you proved that to him. The game ends shortly after, with you returning to the surface and eventually receiving one of the many calls from Sans, each dependent on your specific choices during the playthrough. But like any RPG worth its salt, Undertale doesn't have just one main ending, but instead, 3. The neutral ending, which you just saw, the true pacifist ending, and the genocide route ending. The true pacifist route sees you making a series of detours and deliberate choices, like visiting Alfie's lab and eating the butterscotch pie Toriel gave you in front of Asgore, resulting in a battle against the true final boss of the game.
Asriel Dreamer, the god of hyperdeath.
What kind of fucking name is that? What, did a little kid think that up? Yes. After defeating Asriel and freeing all your friends, the truth is revealed. The soul of Asriel has been trapped in Flowey this entire time, and only through your boundless mercy, determination, and forgiveness is he finally able to find peace, destroying the barrier between the underground and the surface, and allowing for you and all your friends to live together in peace. In the genocide route, you, do a genocide. So, full disclosure, the genocide route is actually something I'm considering doing a full video on at a later date, as the way it punishes the player and changes your playthrough and like the gameplay of Undertale is genuinely some of the most interesting game design I've seen in a long fucking time. Yeah, let me know if you'd be interested in that, and I'll make it. If this video gets 12 likes. No, 13. But the long and short of it is that you, well, again, do a genocide. Killing each and every monster in every area, leveling up, and becoming near unstoppable in your rampage. Sure, some rise up to oppose you, but none are able to truly stop you for long. By the time you've made it to the Hall of Judgment and defeated the sexiest man on Tumblr 2022, you come face to face with Asgore once more. But this time, there is no fight, just a direct ending to things. Flowey once more appears in front of you, this one sadistic force of evil now begging for you not to kill him. It seems that Flowey has forgotten his philosophy, and that you must remind him. In this world, it's kill or be killed. Moments later, you are met with a new face. Kara, the original human and Azrael's sibling that died so long ago. They congratulate you on your handiwork, informing you that your wanton destruction and carnage helped to bring back their very soul from the dead. But now, you've reached the absolute, and you're given a choice to either erase this world or to let it stay. Choose to erase it, and Kara tells you how great of a partner you are, before promising to be with you forever. Refuse to destroy this empty world, and Kara reminds you who's truly in control. And well, that's Undertale. As abridged and quick as that retelling was, I think you can get a pretty good idea of why the game and its story exploded in popularity. Toby Fox had successfully created one of the most heartwarming, memorable gaming experiences in years, with a scope and execution that seemed to get just about everything right. It's no wonder that Undertale's story and characters have inspired a near endless amount of derivatives and fan AUs, each of which either expanding on or remixing the core principles, story beats, and characters of the original game. Say what you will about them, call them cringe if you want, but you don't get this kind of fan engagement without having a story as rich and inviting as Undertale's. But there remained a question on many people's mind after Undertale's release. Where the fuck was Toby Fox gonna go from here? Undertale was, hell, still is a cultural phenomenon. One that, while born from the labor of pretty much just one dude and a couple friends, has become so much bigger than what it was intended to be. A proof of concept for another game Toby wants to make. I mean, put yourself in Toby's shoes real quick. Imagine the pressure of making a piece of media that many consider to be one of, if not the greatest game ever made. And now you have to do it again. To say the pressure was immense would be a big fucking understatement. I mean, how do you follow something like Undertale? Or in the words of the section's title, how do you one-up your magnum opus? But that was just the thing. To Toby, Undertale wasn't his magnum opus, nor would it be his most important work. To him, creating a successor to Undertale wasn't about crafting a sequel or trying to create something of similar or greater scope. No, to Toby, it was about going back to that dream from so many years ago. The same dream that inspired Undertale's creation in the first place. The dream that would eventually end up being Deltarune. Following a few cryptic messages on both Toby Fox's and the official Undertale's Twitter, the first chapter of Deltarune was released on October 31st, 2018, much to the surprise and bemusement of Undertale fans everywhere. Featuring a brand new cast of characters, as well as a few returning faces, Deltarune would seek not to be a direct sequel to Undertale, but more of a loose spiritual successor. While characters from Undertale might appear in Deltarune, they are ostensibly different people, with new lives, jobs, and depression. Shit, bitch, you live like this? The game follows Chris, another androgynous protagonist in Toby Fox's ever-growing pantheon of them, arriving late to school one day. Thanks to their near truancy and a disproportionate classroom size, Chris is paired with the school's most likely to sing a death anthem about Barney to the tune of Joy to the World recipient, Susie. Now, Susie's a little rough around the edges, but I'm into it, so it's fine. Anyway, the two unsuspecting friends are tasked with retrieving some chalk from a supplies closet before they suddenly fall into the dark world, get a bitchin' makeover, and meet the greatest character ever conceived, Ralsei.
I like this. This is cute.
Ralsei, the Dark Prince, tells the two about the legend of three heroes tasked with closing the dark fountains of this world, and thus restoring balance between the light and the dark. From there, our three friends go on an adventure to do just that, once more meeting interesting and fucking weird characters, learning more about this world, and, as it's always the case in Toby Fox games, getting down to some fucking amazing music. Fuck yeah, this cat's cooking! Once the three complete their task, Chris and Susie return to the surface world, thoroughly changed after their adventure, and all the better for it. However, not all is calm in the world of Deltarune, as we see at the end of the first chapter, as Chris seems to tear out their own soul, brandishing a knife, and then giving a piercing red gaze straight at the player. End Chapter 1. Chapter 2 is a pretty much straight continuation of that. Once more resplendent and fun characters, great music, and a compelling story that goes in all the right directions. Once more ending in a cliffhanger of epic proportions. Now, I know it seems like I skipped over a lot of stuff here, and that's because I did. But that's because Deltarune isn't done yet. With only 2 chapters to its name, Deltarune is still very early in its narrative, and so I don't think it's really fair to use an incomplete story to quantify Toby Fox's overall strengths as a writer, because, believe it or not, that is actually the point of the video, quantifying the differences and similarities between Scott Cawthon and Toby Fox as storytellers. And, well, since we're on the topic, let's talk about Toby Fox. In writing, there are 2 kinds of storytellers. The planners and the pantsers. No, I'm not saying these are the only kinds of writers, but for this video, let's pretend they are. The planners, like the name suggests, are writers who approach a story with a basic outline of what they want to cover. Things like what plot points come when, what revelations the reader and characters will uncover, and even sometimes, how the whole thing will end. This outline can be as simple as a few disparate topics that you gradually create connective tissue between, moving from one plot point to the next in the most fluidic way possible. Or they can be incredibly thorough, comprehensive roadmaps of everything you want to accomplish in your story. Regardless of how in-depth your outlines are, they're meant to serve a specific purpose, to inform the writer on where to take their story and how to get there effectively. On the other hand is the pantser, a shortened simplification of the phrase, by the seat of their pants. As you can probably guess, the pantser eschews the use of an outline or roadmap for their story, basically making it up as they go. Now, despite the disorganized connotation that the name might suggest, there's nothing wrong with being a pantser and developing your story as you write it. Some of the most acclaimed authors today are pantsers, for better or for worse. But it's important to realize the different approach to storytelling that both writing styles seem to cultivate. Toby Fox, for example, obviously falls into the planner category. Having created most of the characters in some form back in his college years, it's clear that Toby has been planning Undertale and Deltarune for years now. Sure, the world of Undertale probably wasn't exactly what he intended to create after his late-night fever dream, but the foundation, characters, and humor had been thought of long before he created the game's soundtrack or battle system. Though even with that being said, Undertale's story still feels like a deliberate amount of time and effort was put into it. From the insane amount of dialogue to the fact that Toby had to account for a myriad of potential player choices and options throughout any given playthrough, it's clear to see that Undertale's story wasn't something half-assed or written as the game was being developed. Things like donating money to the Spider Bake Sale during the beginning of the game and then being able to skip the Muppet boss fight later, or any number of the different phone calls from Sans telling you about how the underground changes as a result of your specific actions during that playthrough. No matter which way you want to cut it, Undertale's story is one of the game's greatest aspects, having clearly been intricately planned by Toby from the very beginning. Now, am I saying that Toby didn't pants anything while writing Undertale? No, of course not. Some ideas or plot threads just sort of come to you in the moment and aren't necessarily planned from the beginning. What I am saying, though, is that it's clear that that form of by-the-seat-of-your-pants storytelling is in the minority in Undertale, and even more so with Deltarune. Toby's on record saying that he's already created the full story for Deltarune, and after playing the first 2 chapters, I believe it. Sure, some future aspects or story beats or humor will probably be thought of as he creates them, but that doesn't change the fact that, ultimately, Toby Fox knows where this story is going and how it's going to end. At this point, it's just a matter of waiting to see what he's created and what he's wanted to share with us for so many years. But that's just Toby. What about Scott? Well, probably even more fucking obviously, Scott Cawthon is a pantser. Just about everything in the first few Five Nights at Freddy's games were improvised by Scott while he actively developed them. And on the face of it, that makes sense. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 was meant to be Scott's last hurrah, his last attempt to make something out of what had largely been a failed career in game development. It makes sense that he didn't plan out an all-encompassing lore for a horror series spanning 6+ entries, but it goes a little deeper than that. Scott's seat-of-his-pants style of storytelling is just one factor of why the FNaF storyline makes no fucking sense, as Scott not only decided to create the story as he made the games, but to actively revise established plot points while he did so too. In fact, Scott Cawthon has single-handedly made the lore of FNaF such a clusterfuck that we can't say with any certainty that what we understand as canon today will stay canon. And another thing, actually fuck it, let's just give this its own section.
What are some plot holes in Five Nights at Freddy's?
There are no holes in the plot, only holes in your understanding.
Now, we all know that the story and timeline of Five Nights at Freddy's is a complete and utter clusterfuck, but let's talk about why. Lucky for you, I made a list! You see, we'll call it fucking of the Five Nights at Freddy's storyline didn't happen by one single event, but was instead the gradual fuck-ups of its creator Scotty C over the past many years and many installments in the series. So join me while we take a deep dive into each and every one.
But first, like and subscribe. I like it when the numbers get bigger. It makes me smile. Point 1. Aesthetic choices and their consequences. So Scott Cawthon, above all else, is a game designer. One who went to school for computer animation and who's been designing character models and set pieces for literal decades. As a result of this, Scott's work and design ethos has long been dictated by something I like to call the Cawthon rule of cool, a doctrine that's essentially just, if Scott thinks it's neat or spooky, it's going in the game. You see, Scott doesn't create his games with specific plot points or story moments in mind, but instead through the lens of what's most aesthetically pleasing.
About Five Nights at Freddy's 2, how did you get the idea for, changing the mechanics up a little bit? So the masks and the vents, watching the puppet.
There wasn't a really in-depth planning phase. For like the overall feel of the games, like a lot of these were, I just kind of knew what they were supposed to be, or just kind of felt the way that the series should progress. And I even kind of already had color schemes picked out. Like I knew that part 5 should kind of be purples and blues.
Yeah.
I knew that 3 should be kind of green, and I knew that 2 should be feel kind of industrial, which I think that it does.
But you see, there exists a pretty glaring issue with that design philosophy. The cryptic storytelling of Five Nights at Freddy's has conditioned its fan base into thinking that there's always a concrete, purposeful reason behind every single design choice and decision by Scott, creating this often repeated phrase in the fan base that
Scott doesn't do things randomly, as I'm sure we're all aware by now.
Okay, so let's test that theory. This is Springtrap from FNaF 3. Very cool design, very memorable. Flash forward 3 games in the future and boom, who the fuck is that? That clearly isn't Springtrap. I mean, his whole design is different. Parts of him that were once missing are suddenly back, his whole facial structure is different, he's got a snout now, and oh wow, he even has feet. Where the fuck did he get those? But despite these being clearly different designs, each of which having different names as well, these are the same fucking character. This redesign is never explained. Some might say it's because he's in a worse state of disrepair, but I'm pretty sure older animatronics don't just evolve a pair of fucking feet! But again, these are ostensibly the same person, with some glaring inconsistencies between the two. And I repeat, it's never explained in the games why they look so different. But I can take a pretty good guess as to why. It's because as Scott was redesigning Springtrap for the game, he decided that this new look was cool and scary, and so it's the one he went with. And we can say this with a good amount of certainty, as it's pretty much how we originally designed Springtrap in the 3rd game as well.
How did you think of Springtrap?
I don't know. Once again, he was just the character for that game. I did not sketch out a whole bunch of characters and write pros and cons lists. He was just the natural. He was just the natural villain for that. I knew what the villain was supposed to be, and I just kind of started modeling him, and he just kind of came together.
Now, does it fly in the face of the established lore and story? Absolutely. But it passes the Cawthon rule of cool with flying colors. But don't worry, viewer, this wasn't the first time he'd choose aesthetics over consistency. Why is it that in FNaF 3, all the Phantom animatronics are modeled after their FNaF 2 counterparts? Except for Chica, who retains her same design from FNaF 1? The most likely answer is that it was easier for Scott to model her Phantom version off of the first game's design, or he just thought that she'd look scarier that way. But the fanbase didn't see it that way. Remember, Scott never does anything at random, so this choice to have Phantom Chica retain her FNaF 1 design must have deep lore implications. Time and time again, questions about a design choice's greater implications would be raised by the fanbase, ranging from the number of buttons on Fredbear to the different shades of purple guy. Okay, but why is he orange here? As again and again, Scott's personal design philosophy directly affected the way fans engaged with the lore. And I mean, I guess you can't really blame either party here completely. When it came to the first few FNaF games, you had to do a deep dive into every single nook and cranny to try and find the greater lore significance. This kind of over-analysis just sort of lends itself to the game's less is more style of storytelling. And we can't fully blame Scott here either. Sure, it's aggravating that these inconsistencies happen on his watch, but at the end of the day, it's not like he does them and then just decides they have lore implications later. right? Point 2. No, wait, that design choice actually has massive lore implications. Another fun Scottism that appears throughout the FNaF series is his tendency to do things based on the Cawthon rule of cool, or because he thinks that it's a neat design feature, only to go back and assure fans that said design choice was actually massively important. Take Toy Chica for example. I know I would. In FNaF 2, she's seen with 2 different designs. Her stage design with eyes and beak, and her attack design, where she doesn't have those.
I will fuck the shit out of that robot, man.
Now why would this be the case? Simple, the Cawthon rule of cool. But I know what you're thinking. Scott, you keep throwing around that phrase, but can you prove that that's the reason Scott decided to design Toy Chica like that? To which I'd say, Jesus, having the same name as one of the people you're talking about is confusing as hell. Oh, and also yes.
Was there a reason why you decided to remove Toy Chica's beak after she left the stage probably to make her more creepy, right?
You know, once again, I'm not entirely sure what my mindset was on that. I think it was just kind of a way to distinguish her stage presence Chica from now I'm a monster coming to get you. You know, like if she's entered attack mode or something. But like Toy Chica isn't really scary looking. Toy Chica by herself isn't very scary, I didn't think. And so removing the beak was just one thing to just kind of push it into, making her look a little more uncomfortable.
Okay, case closed. It was to make her look scarier, nothing more. Anyway, fast forward to September 18, 2015. MatPat is hosting an episode of GT Live featuring some of the FNaF community's most talented theorists and content creators. And Smike. However, much to the surprise of the livestream's participants, there was a very specific audience member also watching. Scott Cawthon himself. Over the course of the 2-hour stream, Scott would update his website to leave 3 cryptic clues for the livestream cast. 4 games, 1 story. What is seen in the shadows is easily misunderstood by the mind of a child, and finally, in the FNaF 4 minigame, why would the tiny Toy Chica be missing her beak? Now, ignoring the first 2 clues, let's instead take a look at the third, the one about the Toy Chica's beak. At the time of the livestream, the meaning behind Scott's mysterious messages weren't entirely known. However, today, they still fucking aren't. What were you expecting? Meaning we still don't have an answer for why the Toy Chica is missing her beak in the FNaF 4 minigame. The only loose connection we can make is to Toy Chica's missing beak back in FNaF 2. This connection is literally all we have to go off of. But wait a fucking second. Toy Chica's missing beak in FNaF 2 was a result of Scott trying to make her look less sexy, scarier. It was a design choice, one that was done literally to, in the man's own words, make Toy Chica
look a little more uncomfortable.
However, just a year later, when another appearance of Toy Chica appears, and yes, they are the toy animatronics, Bonnie is blue and has his fucking guitar, suddenly, that missing beak has deep lore implications. Such deep lore implications that Scott chose to draw attention to it in one of the only 3 messages that appeared on his website during the 2-hour live stream. Fucking what? So let's get this straight. Sometimes Scott's design choices are nothing more than stuff he found cool or scary and has no deeper meaning behind it other than that. See Scrap Trap, Fredbear's Buttons, Phantom Chica, etc. However, sometimes those design choices that Scott has admitted were meant to be nothing more than just his attempts to make something scarier, actually are really important to the game's overall lore and story. It's just up to us to somehow be able to discern which is fucking which.
There are no holes in the plot, only holes in your understanding.
But this wouldn't be the first time that Scott's changed his mind about something after the fact. Scott's revisionism of the Five Nights at Freddy's series has become almost infamous in the community, as once established facts have either been retconned or made pointless by later installments in the series. Which brings us to point fucking 3, Scott's flagrant revisionism of the FNaF story. On December 9th, 2014, after his theory about FNaF 1 actually being fanfiction of a series of murders at a Chuck E. Cheese proved to be, fucking stupid, MatPat released his second theory on the FNaF series. In this theory, MatPat sought to answer all the remaining questions that were left after FNaF's 2 release, things like who the purple guy was, what the timeline looked like, and the significance of Golden Freddy. A little bit later, Scott made his Steam post stating that Game Theory did an incredible video on Part 2, getting almost everything right. However, if you were to take a look at that video today, you'd notice that it really doesn't stand the test of time. Things like how the purple guy was Phone Guy.
Is the purple man the phone guy?
He's actually William Afton. How the purple guy used the Golden Freddy suit to kill the kids.
Our pal the murderer uses a Golden Freddy suit to lure away and kill 5 children in the back room.
He actually used the Spring Bonnie suit. How the puppet makes an appearance in FNaF 1.
The puppet is in the first game. Take a look at the east hallway. Seems pretty normal, right? But every so often, the posters on the walls change to this: a crying child with 2 streaming lines down his face.
Nope, those are just the crying children. How the child that possesses the puppet was killed outside of Fredbear's family diner.
This death minigame has you playing as Freddy, taking cake to screaming children at a birthday party, as a purple man pulls up in a car, murders the child, and drives off. It's my belief, loyal theorists, that this game takes place at Fredbear's diner.
Actually, it's outside of a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, or how the puppet was technically the first victim of the purple guy.
Chronologically, the first event that we see in this timeline, this murdered child, is the one that sets everything into motion. We can make a pretty good case that this kid's murdered spirit eventually found its way into the puppet animatronic.
This one was probably true until Ultimate Custom Night came around and had this fucking line.
I was the first. I have seen everything.
From a contemporary standpoint, this video really doesn't hold up to what we know to be lore accurate today. But that's the thing. I'm almost certain that a good amount of what MatPat theorized on in that video was true, at least at the time of its release. By Scott's own admission, MatPat got, quote, almost everything right. Until he didn't. Now, are we to believe that Scott actively changed parts of the story as a result of people like MatPat or other fans guessing certain plot points or predicting where the story is going? Yes. But hey, that's not just a theory, that's a provable fact.
I watch all the game theory videos, and me and MatPat have sometimes had an antagonistic relationship back and forth. I inconvenience him with my games, and sometimes he inconveniences me with his theories, but it's all in good fun,
What do you mean by that, Scott? What do you mean his fan theories inconvenienced you, Scott? Okay, no, but let's talk about this. MatPat inconveniences Scott with his theory, which is to say that every once in a while, when he's not delving into the hex code of character dialogue or getting impregnated by Springtrap, MatPat has an accurate theory that more or less gets a lot of shit right about the lore, thus inconveniencing Scott Cawthon. And what does Scott Cawthon do when MatPat or any other theorist gets something right? He changes it. But maybe you're having trouble believing that Scott has actively changed the story of FNaF as it's been created, regardless of the reason. If that's the case, then I direct you to The Box, Scott's dark gray rectangular middle finger to the entire fanbase. What's in the box? No one knows. Now, let me say that again for you, dear viewer, because I'm afraid that the greater meaning might be lost here. No one knows. Not even Scott.
But I'll tell you, he did a video on that box, and he kind of said that he thinks the contents of the box changed over the years. And I bet nobody gave that a whole lot of thought, but I saw that and I was like, he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. The contents of that box have changed over the years.
I repeat, no one knows what's inside the box, not even Scott, because it keeps fucking changing. We'll never truly know what the contents are, because that would require Scott to finally figure it out himself. And even then, he probably wouldn't reveal what it is anyways. But the point still stands. Scott actively changed what is supposed to be an integral part of the lore multiple times based on either fan reaction, or his own personal feelings about it, or people guessing what it might be. Meaning that what is right today might not be right tomorrow. And that's what makes the Five Nights at Freddy's lore so frustrating. We, as fans, are constantly being barraged with one apparent piece of lore being confirmed before another comes along and directly contradicts that, always without clarification on what we should make of the first piece of information. We are left to pick up the pieces of Scott's disaster piece, forever left guessing and theorizing about a story that can never be solved. And whether he intended for it to be the case or not, that's literally by design. We've been forced to fool ourselves into thinking that this man doesn't do anything at random, while his design choices and storytelling prove that's clearly not the case. Worse yet, even when we can write something off as just an aesthetic decision, there's no guarantee it'll stay that way, as features or design choices that were once pointless or just for aesthetics are suddenly given deep implications on the game's lore. Even the things that we know have deep lore implications, that we know play a greater part in the story, are subject to change. How many times has the contents of that box changed, and how many more times will it change in the future? And at this point, with as many installments into the series as there are, does it even matter? You want to know what I think? No? Too bad, motherfucker, that watch time says differently. I think this is why FNaF's story aggravates me and so many other people so much. My early teen years were inundated with Five Nights at Freddy's. Truth be told, I love FNaF. Its earlier games and lore will always hold a dear place in my heart, but with that appreciation comes an understanding that engaging with its story, with its lore, with its mysteries, just isn't worth it. Being a fan of FNaF is fine, but engaging with its story is a fucking chore, one that you are actively punished for doing. FNaF is the only series I can think of where, with each new installment, you actively understand less about its lore. Because let's be honest here, we'll never know where the story of FNaF will go, where it will end, or where it was supposed to end. All we can do is theorize, be wrong, and then try again. All while its creator tells us otherwise. That while we can provably show that the lore and story of these games has been contradicted, retconned, and destroyed over time, somehow there are no holes in the plot, only holes in our understanding. Perhaps he wasn't speaking just to us. Perhaps this message, as condescending and wrong as it was as much to Scott himself as to everyone else. Don't worry, Scott. There are no holes in your plot, just holes in everyone else's understanding. An affirmation repeated to himself over and over again, all in the hopes that it might one day be true. Today, Toby Fox is hard at work on the next few installments of Deltarune. Thankfully for us, but definitely for Toby, the production of these future chapters seems to be much less arduous of a task than the previous two, thanks to both the groundwork laid in chapters 1 and 2, as well as Toby now having a team of bona fide professionals to help him. You can find updates on the next few chapters on the official Deltarune site, where Toby occasionally shares how development's going, posting a few tracks and levels from upcoming chapters and other cool stuff like that. But to me, the most important part about this update is that development going forward seems like it's going to be a lot easier. And honestly, I'm glad to see it. Not just because it means new Deltarune chapters sooner, but because Toby deserves it. For years now, the man has tortured himself with creating massive games like Undertale and Deltarune, each taking on the creative responsibilities of pretty much an entire game studio, all by himself. He deserves some help in bringing his games and his dream to life. Toby's still been pretty active in the fanbase as well, whether it be by writing fanfiction about Sans winning the Tumblr Sexy Man poll to more philanthropic pursuits like the fever dream that was the Spamton Sweepstakes, a 24-hour livestream dedicated to raising money for the charity Child's Play, a game industry charity dedicated to improving the lives of children and teens in children's hospitals around the world. I plagiarized that straight from the website. It's okay, no one's going to watch this far. After everything was said and done, more than $322,000 was raised as a result of the livestream, helping to make the lives of sick kids and teens a little bit better. Scott's made a few donations too. So for those of you who don't know, Scott is an American. Shocker, I know, but I can do you one better. Scott is a middle-aged Christian guy living in Texas. You see where I'm going with this? It should come as a surprise to nobody when it was revealed in mid-2021 that Scott has made several donations to, let's call them, particularly divisive Republican candidates over the years. Now, I'm not going to say that Scott shouldn't have done this. He's an American citizen. He can choose to spend his money on whatever candidate or party or thing that he supports. However, I'm 100% going to make fun of him for who he chose to give money to. Scott, $5,000 to Mitch McConnell? He wasn't going to lose, Scott. Politics aside, you're just throwing away your fucking money. Though there's a plethora of communities impacted by Scott's political contributions, he addressed LGBT fans directly, saying in his initial statement on the matter that, despite these political contributions, he doesn't see himself as a homophobe, and cares deeply for the LGBT members of his fanbase who might be upset by this news. And, I mean, finding out that the creator of one of your favorite horror franchises literally maxed out his contributions to a candidate that's voted against federal hate crimes protections for LGBT people on 3 separate occasions, and would later go on to vote against codifying same-sex marriage and interracial marriage literally a decade later was, to Scott's point, a little upsetting for LGBT fans of FNaF. Scott clarified that while yes, he did support figures like Trump, Nunes, Ben Carson, McCarthy, and McConnell, he also supported a few Democrats as well, like Tulsi Gabbard. And of course, Democrat John Gregg here in Indiana. Good job, Scott. I'm sure that $5 really helped. However, just 4 days later, Scott would announce his official retirement from FNaF in a post that pretty much just starts off with, "Fucker looks badass, doesn't he?" Scott revealed in the update that he would instead focus on his family going forward, handing over the reins to FNaF to a new creator at a later date. Now, this is why this topic is so divisive, because it really comes down to a matter of opinion. If you share Scott Cawthon's political morals and ideas, then you probably don't see an issue with him supporting the candidates that he did. And again, he has the right to do that as an American citizen. However, if you're a part of the LGBTQ community and you like FNaF, or you have interacted with its fan base over the years, you have a right to be made uncomfortable and distressed by Scott's contributions, to find out that the creator of something you love for so long has been actively supporting and financially helping those who are seeking to take away your rights is really distressing to hear. Personally, I don't think that Scott Cawthon is a transphobe or a homophobe or has any active contempt for the LGBT community. However, it's clear he has no issue with stomaching and supporting those who are. And that's really the main difficulty that people in the LGBTQ community have had to contend with for when it comes to the Scott Cawthon situation. Asking the question of, what is worse? Someone who is transphobic and homophobic, or someone who claims not to be, but has no issue with financially supporting those who are? Again, at the end of the day, you have to make your own opinion on that. I can't do it for you. No, literally, I'm not allowed to do that for you. This guy with a Patrick Bateman profile picture said that I'm not allowed to talk about my own personal politics in the same breath as video game discussion, so I guess I'm not gonna be able to weigh in on my opinions on the LGBTQ community. Anyways, check out this bitchin' flag I bought. But at the end of the day, I think Scott made the right decision in retiring. Regardless of what you feel about the man and his politics, no one should be sent death threats, or be doxxed, or feel as if their own family's lives are in danger. And I think retiring to hang out with his wife and 6 kids is what Scott ultimately deserves. He's earned a life without needing to worry about making ends meet or working as a cashier at a fucking Dollar General. And even if he's not directly involved in FNaF anymore, which I'm pretty sure he still is, I think we can all rest easy knowing that whoever ends up picking up the reins will find their own unique ways to fuck up the story and lore. Yes, I'm still bitter. But to return to the thesis statement that I totally brought up at the beginning of the video, what can we learn about these two developers' approaches to storytelling and their individual stories of success? As different as their writing styles are, both Toby and Scott are ultimately stories of success. Stories of single individuals who, with the help of friends and family, or God himself, managed to create something that's been enjoyed the world over. While FNaF is a far cry from what it was during its first installment, and Undertale 2 has more or less just become nothing more than meme fodder in most contemporary internet circles, both of these games did at one point dominate the internet. They became popular and widely successful because their creators chose to never give up, because they learned from their past mistakes, because they followed their dreams in the most literal sense, and used the love and support of those around them to strive forward. And honestly, regardless of how you personally feel about either of these games, there's a lot to be gained by emulating those attributes, not only in daily life, but in your writing as well. Whether you're a planner or a pantser, there's going to be pitfalls and perks that come with both. You shouldn't look at the success of Undertale and think, man, all stories that are planned for the beginning will reach that kind of success. The same way you wouldn't look at FNaF's story and think, wow, this is what happens when you don't properly plan out your stories. Because, again, there are always exceptions to the rules. There are undoubtedly stories planned from the very beginning that pale in comparison to those that are just sort of made up as time goes on. What it really comes down to at the end of the day is whichever form of writing fits you best. So long as you're able to effectively tell the story you want in the way that's most conducive to your style, then that's really all that matters. Life is too short to not take that leap of faith and share your vision with the rest of the world, whether that vision is a spontaneous idea or a concept you've been developing for years. So long as it inspires you to create, to write, and to make something you'll be proud of. That's all that really matters. Because hey, regardless of how well that story is made or received, you never know who you might end up inspiring down the road. And so, this brings us to the end of our video. The tales of Scott and Toby are ones of strife, success, but above all else, storytelling. And while you may feel one way about their individual stories and games or things that they've created, there's still a lot to learn from both. To all my prospective writers, game devs, storytellers out there, you too will one day come across a question of what form of storytelling
fits you the best, whether it be one charted from the very beginning, or the story that you discover alongside your fans and your readers, or your viewers, or your listeners as you create it. So long as it's the story that you want to create, and so long as you can look back and be satisfied with what you have created, that's all that really matters, regardless of how you get there. And if I can offer one more hard and fast rule for all you dear viewers out there, one thing you should know about writing: if anyone ever tells you that there are plot holes in your story, laugh at them and say, no, there's no holes in the plot, there's holes in their understanding. And then give Mitch McConnell $5,000.
Green light, red light, flicker swinging by the